Hiya, I'm Matt Walsh, aka Visual Assistants, and bear with me a minute. My feasibility study looked into applying superfast broadband to a sort of modern digital version of the traditional post house. I'm a creative director and I earn my bread and butter by making the horrible MTV pop videos that you might not like, and also the commercials in between TV that you probably go and make a cup of tea for. But, basically the traditional system relies upon, in the post-production stage, the final stage before broadcast, relies upon people working together in a room in close proximity. It's quite expensive, normally in the region of about from maybe 400 to 900 pounds per hour to hire a suite, and this one in particular has got some wine glasses there, and that sort of thing is usually laid on within the price. However, to follow on from what Denzel was saying so eloquently with his fantastic transitions for his PowerPoint, I'm sorry, mine don't live up to yours, mate, but the budgets are shrinking. This primarily happened with the music industry following the invention of the MP3 and online music. And now it's happened, that sort of rolled on to the budgets that we had to work with for pop videos. And they went, I'd say, from being the average high-end pop promo in the beginning of the 90s was about £1 million for maybe just over 3 minutes. And currently the top whack end is maybe around 50,000. So the scale of it has fallen considerably. And this is happening now also in commercial television, particularly with the proliferation of channels. So we're heading, I was saying to Chris earlier, heading far more towards an American model where commercials are made for peanuts, as opposed to they used to be something which was very expensive. So we need to cut costs, and one way of doing that is not having the post-production done in Soho. So what I've looked into was basically moving it to a remote location. Oh, I should have clicked that one, shouldn't I? So there's a number of reasons why it works really well. It increases working flexibility, so you've got shrinking budgets, you've got people who are compromising their work considerably. Maybe directors are taking on a second job while the first one's still in post, and they need to basically take on more work to support their lifestyle. There's been a lot of people who've had lifestyle shocks in the film business where they've been sort of living amazing, sort of dreamlike existences in Soho, but suddenly the plug has been pulled out of the budgets and they're finding themselves unable to support that. So that's quite a common thing that's happened. Also, in my opinion, I think it's much nicer to live in Cornwall as opposed to Soho and step off the tube with the grubby clothes at the end of the day. So I actually think creativity is much better if the person who's the operator, whether that be a camera operator or otherwise, is in a more pleasant environment. I personally find Cornwall a much nicer place to work. Also, another aspect that I experimented with was digital data security in transport. Traditionally, we'd have used a physical courier to carry the cans, as you heard, so you'd have big cans of film, and you had to babysit this in aeroplanes. Now, as the speed increases, there are ways in which we can transfer the footage, which is incredibly expensive because it's had all the production work done into it. We can transfer that digitally. So that's another thing that I experimented with, and I've been doing over about the past 5 years, particularly with lower resolution proxies of high resolution footage. So typically in a post house, when we're charging people about £900 an hour, which really isn't acceptable anymore, even though it says so on rate cards, our data rate's about 1.6 gig per second in terms of required bandwidth. This may seem a shock to people, but it's been like that since we digitised the first 35mm plate back in, what, 1980 something. And you need really high bandwidth to make film. What else? We also use things like InfiniBand between machines and fibre as standard. So my problem was I needed to get this bandwidth to a client so that they can view me in real time at a sufficient rate which does justice to the material. This isn't simply streaming high definition. The people that I work with are professionals. They have professional eyes. Some of them are psychologists, so they work in sales teams. Other people are DOPs, so they're worried about what film stock they chose, what grain it's got in it, and some really fine details which most people watching television don't really ever see or think about. But it all goes in. So we have to be very picky about what we see. So you've got this, basically this complex sort of enterprise level server architecture to work with, and we've got to somehow squeeze that down a broadband connection. So some of the issues that I had, bear with me, hang on a minute, wrong one. Yeah, were around things like colour. So I needed to get, this is just one thing, and in fact this projector is only 8-bit, so you can't really see it very well. There are issues like banding, which you might see here, very vivid edge around this part here. This side doesn't have any banding on it. So that's a typical example of what compression can do. And ideally we don't want to have that sort of artifact happening as we pump the signal out of the remote post house into the ether. It needs to, so the system that I had to build had to have flexibility and gamut changes in the colour. And this is all in real time, or as fast as to real time as I can possibly get. You should have the ability to handle a variety of formats, frame rates and data while maintaining image quality. So I need to go up to about 4K, realistically speaking 5K, since there are a lot of shoots now being done at 5K, so that's a 5,000 pixel image size. This has particularly been the case since the Epic came out last year, which is a new digital camera that shoots large plates. It should not disturb the operator platform in any way, so I had to make it minimally intrusive, and this was a massive problem. Because as an operator, you're constantly trying to focus on simply looking at the image and processing it for the client. So the client will say, oh, I didn't like that, I've got a spot on this side. Can you get rid of that? Can my eyes look more blue? And you need to behave as if you're a waiter in a restaurant. They're paying £900 an hour. So, you know, that sort of client-operator relationship, you've got to be absolutely spot on with them. And they're used to that. So to take them out of that scenario and say, it's okay, you can be in the bath on your iPad and work with me, you've got to be very, very careful, because this has been something that's happened for a long, long time, for maybe, what, nearly 20 years. So I had to get my lag down to a minimum amount in the streaming stage. What else have I put? It needs to be flexible. So the system that I built, the server system for broadcasting the signal out, was flexible, so I could strap it onto different platforms for finishing. So if it was something like DaVinci Resolve or Mystica or something like that, you can basically take the box that I invented, not invented because it's probably been done before somewhere, and strap it onto the side of whatever platform you're working with. I'd say the hardware would cost you in the region of about 15 grand. But that's minimal in comparison to the actual platform that you're running, which is in the region of about anywhere between 50 and 150,000 pounds for a basic finishing system. And another problem that I had was it has to be totally client orientated, so that the client has minimal sort of change in it or disturbance. And also another thing that I found that was really intuitive and attractive to clients was the fact that I could simultaneously stream it onto an iPad, an iPhone, a laptop and a grade 1 broadcast monitor simultaneously through a secure connection, because they're obviously very concerned that not just any old person can look at the stream that I'm pumping up. So there's a few nice pictures for you to look at here. And here's some examples of grain deterioration, which may look like noise to you, but it's not that good on this projector. You can see the image on the right hand side is not very grainy. And I used an X264 compressor to broadcast with. Let's have a look. And here's some typical broadcast colour bars that went through, and these are all this is prior to the stage of actually changing things and writing some code in the X264 compressor with a software development team that were in beta testing at the time actually, who were very helpful. You can see again the magenta shift that's happening, which to me is absolutely critical, and also the gamma's changed because I can see the stripe just here. So these are just really simple examples that you can see very obviously. There's a plethora of other stuff that I had to go through to make it work well. Yeah. So I've been using an intermediate system since about 2005, and this revolves around me sending the client a file, them looking at it, writing up a list of notes, and then them sending the notes back to me and looking at the video that I've sent them, which is incredibly clunky and not very creatively or aesthetically pleasing, and doesn't lend itself to something that is based on time and colour and sound and things. So this system that I've used working with people that I used to work with in London, who are dotted about all over the globe, is okay, but it's far from ideal. And being able to test a simulator connection using UCF's network has been something that I've been trying to do for a number of years now. In fact, I contacted Julian about it, I think 3 years ago. So it was great to be able to get into Phil's office and actually do the testing with a connection that was fully open and I could fiddle with it. So I've kind of taken the lessons that I've learned from the system that I've been developing since about 2005 and taken all the good bits that I could find that people seem to be adopting, that clients were prepared to adopt and take on, and streamline those things into a hardware system which meant that they were using the same compressor as they were used to, but it was delivering next to real-time kind of version. Let's have a look. Yeah, so I needed to find a compressor that could do the job, and I used H.264 for the round-robin system because it's a really quick and easy thing to do, and also it's got CUDA encoding, which is a parallel processing system embedded into it, which I use an awful lot and is used a lot in graphics. If you know what CUDA is, it's a product invented by NVIDIA. It's probably invented by someone else, but it means that you can harness hundreds of processors simultaneously to compress something. And it happens like that, as opposed to if you use the processors on board the machine, it would chug along. So the X264 codec was easily streamed via an RMVB server, which I found to be the sort of most efficient way of doing it. And then I embedded that into a client web page, which had various options, whether or not you're on an iPad, an iPhone, or you know, your phone eating breakfast in the morning, or anything flexible like that. And this was a secure login as well, which is critical, because there's lots of things revolving around stuff that hasn't been broadcast yet, just like Chris has got.
Just have to watch the time.
Yeah, okay. This is the signal prior to it being broadcast, and this is an 8,000 kilobits per second downgrade. So that's a typical level of degradation, which is quite considerable, to be honest with you. It may not look like much, but that's much higher quality than your television. So I had some conversations with ISPs, and I tested across Europe, Africa and Australia with people that I've worked with. In fact, OmniLab in Australia have taken my idea and their creative directors are implementing it in reverse to monitor projects from their rural homes in Australia, to monitor their guys working on stuff in the cities. So my conclusions are that when I contacted the ISPs, they were unable to give me any concrete answers as to future performance models for upload speeds, which I found interesting, but not, nothing too bad. Lag is an issue. Skype, wishish, I don't know what I've written there, was used for communications and had about 200 milliseconds of delay. However, the stream is delayed by sometimes up to about 5 seconds. So this is all down to an operator and the operator's skill. And I shall rush to the end, and you can read all that. The things that I found most important, I think, were the psychological and economic factors of accepting this method are more influencing than the ability to harness superfast broadband. So in terms of selling this to a client, I've struggled actually doing it with a new client. I've only been able to do this with people that I have a good relationship prior and that I've worked with physically in a room together. What else have I written there? Yeah, there's some hardware out there that's available, which I've been using in the past 5 years to bond lines together. And it was really irritating because I know that fibre to the premises, fibre to the cabinet, it's possible to bond it together and get a much faster upload speed. But none of the ISPs could answer my questions when I asked them, was this possible? Could I do this? What are the theoretical models that I can work with to test with? However, overall, my whole thing relies upon the intermediate pings from servers. So it doesn't matter if I can pump it up at 16,000 or 32,000 kilobits per second. If there's a server somewhere along the line that's running on a Intel version 3 processor and the ping's slow, I'm completely screwed. So it does rely upon a global coverage of fibre, and I hope that happens soon. By the way, sorry, folks, I'm a creative, by the way. I've directed lots of television, and I'm not a techie. Just before you walk away and say, "Oh, you see, remember that tech guy?" Yeah, no, I'm incredibly creative, and this is knowing my palette well. So, yeah, question time.
Could you say something a bit more about the relationship? Because you've said you've only worked with people that you've already got a relationship
yes,
with.
Yeah.
I mean, what would the challenges be? Because presumably it can't work as a business model unless you can engage with people that you
to expand your business
before.
Yeah. Well, I pay my mortgage at the moment, all right. But like you say, yeah, it needs to be expanded and rolled out and become more attractive. Obviously, to be a viable business model that does expand, then yeah, there needs to be something concrete, and that's basically determined by the ISPs not being able to give me any concrete answers, because if they did, I would be able to say I can guarantee X, Y and Z parameters for you, why don't you try it? But I think it's one of these things that has to be, I mean, production's an incredibly tight thing, it's deadlines continuously, it's incredibly pressured, and the cycle, if you cock up, you're only as good as your last job. And I can't suddenly say to somebody, why don't you try it? It'll cock up. There's a possibility it could. X, Y, or Z could happen. And then my neck's on the line forever. Whereas if it's somebody that I've known, they'll say, yeah, go on, Matt, let's give it a go. Like my friend in Melbourne, that's fine. But if you to go out and actually, try that and say, it's a bit like having sort of a remote restaurant or something like that, and the meal's horrible. They won't come back, basically, is my answer to that.
So, just try and take a few steps forward then.
Yeah.
If there was a sort of bespoke boutique ISP that guaranteed certain connections through certain routes, certain servers, so that it was always the fastest possible route, that might be a good thing. That I was trying to think of a nice way of saying what that's a good spin out that BT could do. some people could leave and set that up and provide a really good service, because obviously a demonstration of a marketplace.
Well, it's guaranteed prioritised traffic
that'd be
up,
really good.
and it has to be up.
Yeah.
But for Russia's transfer, it needs to be up and down. But it's always the up that gets, there's reasons, there's good technical reasons why the upload speed is as it is and sold in the way it is. But with line bonding, you can get around that. And that is the other option, is that if it does become a viable business model, then you go with a number of ISPs, whichever one's working at the right time, you switch your Firebricks around and point towards that one. I mean, I don't understand fully the infrastructure of how exactly the optical switches work within the fibre system, but there must be something funky going on somewhere, which means that my ping to Kenya is less than the one to Ethiopia, which is bizarre to me. But there's all sorts of oddities that I'm sure will happen with time, but yeah. Up bandwidth is critical, in my opinion, isn't spoken about enough, particularly for exporting businesses. I think that needs to be nailed, in my opinion. But that's just for me, isn't it? So might be a bit biased there.